Jonathan here, and today I'm bringing to you the Principles of Biomedical Science Fall Final Project, the ABC Project. The reason I'm making this quick introduction video is to say that this video is going to be pretty long because I used all 55 clues instead of the 26 clues that we were supposed to use because I started this project before we were told that we only had to use 26 clues. But the thing is, I made this video for me to study and to review everything for the final exam, but also for anyone else who's watching it. So you can go ahead and skip throughout the video to focus on the parts that you need help on and which you need to cover in a review. And since this is a long video, just sit back and relax.
The role that agarose gel plays in gel electrophoresis is that it is the part in which the DNA is put on, in which the electrical current is run through to spread the DNA strands throughout the gel, creating a unique DNA fingerprint which can be compared to others later. Aprons are a type of personal protective equipment used at essentially any time a lab activity or experiment is taking place. Aprons help to protect your clothing, such as Jandals, Gucci's, Versace, etc., and provides protection by covering your whole upper and lower body abdomen area. An example of a chemical indicator is Biomed, which is used to indicate when there is a molecule of protein in the substance. Biomed is used to mix with a substance to verify whether or not the substance contains protein molecules. A negative result outcomes to the mixture staying the same color, whereas a positive result ends up making the mixture turning purplish. A blood analyst is a person who solves violent crimes such as assault and murder through analyzing bloodstain patterns. Through bloodstain patterns, they can identify the movements of both victim and assailant, identify potential murder weapons, and determine a victim/assailant's height. Being a blood analyst relates to forensic science through the fact that forensic science is defined as the application of scientific knowledge to legal problems and criminal investigations, and blood analysts use their scientific knowledge of reading bloodstain patterns to aid in finding out what happened at a crime scene. An analytical test that can be used to diagnose a disease would be a blood glucose tolerance test, which can be used to diagnose diabetes. The blood glucose tolerance test works by recording the amount of glucose in the bloodstream over a period of time after fasting to determine how the body handles glucose intake. If the glucose remains close to the same or the same after 2 hours, diabetes is diagnosed. If not, prediabetes or normal glucose regulation can be diagnosed if the glucose level returns to its normal state. An example of a positive feedback loop is a breast milk hormone loop, which is a positive feedback loop because of the fact that the definition of a positive feedback loop is a process in which the effects of a small disturbance on a system include an increase in its effect, which directly correlates how each step of the breast milk hormone loop adds on to the next step, and directly causes the next step by adding another process. As the baby sucks on the mother's breast, it releases and sends a signal to the hypothalamus, which releases oxytocin, which then goes and releases more milk for the baby to continue to suck. Calcium is a mineral that can be gotten through milk and is needed to help build strong bones and teeth. The method of measuring the energy in food is called the calorimeter method. This method is implemented through measuring the heat of chemical reactions or physical changes, as well as heat capacity. It is used by the substances being added to a calorimeter, and the initial and final temperatures are noted. Multiplying the temperature change by the mass of the substances gives a value for the energy given off or absorbed during the reaction. Dividing the energy change by how many moles were present gives the amount of energy and the change of reaction. Energy in food is found in the chemical bonds of the food molecules. Energy is released through catabolism, which breaks these bonds and allows the body to take in the energy, usually in the form of ATP energy. Out of the 5 kinds of nucleotides, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil, cytosine is found in DNA and RNA. Cytosine pairs with guanine, which can be remembered by the saying, Arlington, Texas, go Cowboys. Cytosine is a pyrimidine and has 3 hydrogen bonds connecting it with guanine. The process by which monomers become polymers is called dehydration synthesis, and it's when a chemical reaction builds up molecules for 2 monomers to join together into polymers while losing water molecules, hence the name dehydration. In the bloodstain splatter lab, we were trying to find out how the height at which blood is dropped affects the size of bloodstains. The dependent variable was the diameter of the bloodstain. The diameter of the bloodstain was a dependent variable because it depended on the height that we dropped the blood drops from. It is a dependent variable because it responded to the variable we changed, which was the independent variable.
In the food testing lab, where we discovered what types of food contained the different types of macromolecules, we used distilled water as a negative control. Distilled water was the negative control because with the negative control, we expect the result not to occur. And because distilled water is not the same as the indicators for starch, lipids, glucose, or protein, no reaction occurred, making sure that the experiment was functional and would not react to essentially nothing besides the specific indicators. Evidence that could be collected at a crime scene could be and would be DNA, which could be found in blood, vomit, or saliva. The people who would collect this would be the crime scene investigators who package and label evidence for transfer to the lab. The evidence would be analyzed by a DNA forensic analyst through first running the DNA through polymerase chain reaction to increase the amount of DNA, and then to run it through an agarose gel using gel electrophoresis to create a special DNA fingerprint and compare different pieces of DNA to find the owner of the DNA. Britannica.com, Encyclopedia Britannica, is a reliable source of information. It is a reliable source of information because it is a very prestigious and well-known information source that has been around for a notable amount of time. The authors are well educated in the subjects at hand, and there are little to no advertisements around the website. Because of these factors, I conclude that it is a reliable source. An endocrinologist is a medical professional who helps diabetics. The education needed for an endocrinologist is that of a typical doctor at a specialist college, medical school, and then residency. The role that an endocrinologist plays in helping diabetics is by helping return the endocrine system and the hormones it releases back to normal to create a normal balance in the body, in homeostasis. Also, an endocrinologist can give you tips on how to lead a healthier lifestyle and combat diabetes. The chemical needed to extract DNA are enzymes, proteases, which break down the protein core in DNA called histone. With histone broken up, the DNA can more easily be extracted. Also, but to a lesser extent, the enzymes break down DNA's enzymes, which will chop up DNA to protect the cell from viruses. And with the DNase enzymes gone, all the DNA can mix together and can be easily extracted. A way a person could die that would require an autopsy would be foul play. An autopsy would be required in this situation to make sure that the person responsible, if any, for the death are held responsible for their actions, and the correct justice and procedure are followed to make sure that the victim gets correct treatment and his death is correctly identified, and no extraneous factors such as disease or other bodily anomalies cause death. Gel electrophoresis is the method used to separate RFLPs, restriction fragment length polymorphisms, created by the restriction enzymes cutting apart the DNA. Gel electrophoresis is the process used to separate different DNA strands by their length and creating a unique DNA fingerprint by running an electric current through an agarose gel and letting the DNA strands to separate out, being attracted by the positive end starting from the negative end, since the DNA is negatively charged and is attracted to the positive end. Glucose is a monosaccharide whose chemical structure is C6H12O6. Its indicator is Benedict's solution, and a food that would contain glucose would be fruits. An example of a negative feedback loop would be a glucose homeostasis loop in the human body. This is a negative feedback loop because it uses special actions in the body to counteract other actions and maintain homeostasis of glucose in the bloodstream. Since it counteracts instead of adding upon to cause a chain reaction, it is a negative feedback loop. Amino acid example would be glycine. Glycine has an aliphatic R group, is nonpolar, and is hydrophobic, meaning it repels water. In the bloodstain splatter lab, the independent variable was height. Height was the independent variable because when we change this variable, we see a result through the dependent variable, diameter of the blood spot. Also, we can see it as an independent variable because we are the ones who change it, not that it responds to another factor. The law that protects patient privacy is HIPAA, also known as Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. HIPAA protects patient information from people who do not need to know, where the people who need to know are the doctors or nurses who provide health care. HIPAA protects patients' information such as birth date, symptoms, treatment, and much more from being spread by the healthcare providers. The hydrogen bond is the component of DNA that links together the two nitrogenous bases. The hydrogen bond, which is very strong, is found in the center of the DNA strand to connect the two nitrogenous bases, which are right at the periphery of the center place of the DNA. The number of hydrogen bonds differs from adenine and thymine, which have 2, and guanine and cytosine, which have 3. The process by which polymers become monomers is called hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is when water is added to a polymer, and the bonds between the monomers are broken down because of the water, and a chemical breakdown of the polymer occurs due to its reaction with water. A crucial part of an autopsy is the internal examination, which is used to find evidence of trauma or other indications of the cause of death. The internal examination is used to make sure the cause of death is correct and not naturally caused from something else. The internal examination starts with a Y-shaped incision from shoulders to pubic bone. All the organs and rib cage are taken out. They are all weighed. Stomach contents are examined, the brain is examined, and evidence of trauma is looked for. A jelly donut is a food high in lipids. The components of the donut that are made of lipids are the grease and oil that contain high amounts of fat. The indicator for lipids is Sudan 3, or, more well known, the brown paper bag test. The lipids in the donut are saturated and bad as they are not natural and from oil and grease. A treatment for diabetes could be jogging, keeping a healthy lifestyle. A person with type 2 diabetes could use this sort of treatment because with type 2 diabetes you can prevent diabetes by leading a healthy lifestyle. Also, exercising helps to make your insulin receptors not immune to the insulin, thus treating diabetes. Kidney is an organ of the urinary system. The kidney helps to eliminate waste from the body by filtering our intake of liquids. When the kidney is not functional, it is called a kidney failure, and harmful waste build up in our body, which calls for treatment to help the damaged kidneys or a kidney replacement. A complication of diabetes is kidney disease. Diabetes can damage this system. High levels of blood sugar make the kidneys filter too much blood. All this extra work is hard on the filters. After many years, they start to leak and useful protein is lost in the urine. Having small amounts of protein in the urine is called microalbuminuria. In time, the stress of overwork causes the kidneys to lose their filtering ability. Waste products then start to build up in the blood. Finally, the kidneys fail. A body system is the lymphatic and immune system, which filters fluid in the body and mounts the attack against foreign substances in the body. Key organs and structures of the lymphatic and immune system include lymph nodes, the spleen, thymus, and bone marrow. A medical professional involved in determining cause of death would be a medical examiner, who is a certified physician that goes through the same education to become a doctor as a family medicine doctor, and maybe even more because of specialty training. A medical examiner performs an autopsy on the dead body, and then, through all the information gained from the autopsy, a cause of death is made by the medical examiner. A blood-stained splatter dropping from 90 degrees with no elongation would tell investigators that the blood dropped straight up from the ground, at a perpendicular angle to the ground. An example of a polymer would be nucleic acid. Nucleic acids are found in the nucleus of a cell, hence the name nucleic. Nucleic acids are a polymer because they are made up of smaller monomers, nucleotides, to create a more complex structure. An example of a monomer would be a nucleotide. Nucleotides are found in the DNA of a cell, as nucleotides make up DNA. Nucleotides are monomers because they are the basic building blocks that help to create larger polymers, such as nucleic acids. An example of a hormone in the body is oxytocin. Oxytocin's function is to act as a chemical messenger in the brain, controlling key aspects of the reproductive system, such as childbirth and lactation. The organ that makes oxytocin is the hypothalamus, and its target organs are the breast and uterus. The method used is the photograph method. Of the 5 steps in processing a crime scene, collecting evidence, interviewing, examining, sketching, and photographing, photographing is used to clearly represent a crime scene and all the elements before they are altered, allowing the crime scene investigators to preserve the crime scene for future examination. Polymerase chain reaction is the only way to amplify DNA to a sufficient amount to which gel electrophoresis can be performed. Polymerase chain reaction can create thousands to millions of copies at an exponential rate, which takes about 2 to 3 hours with small PCR amplicons. A risk factor for developing diabetes is prediabetes, as prediabetes means your blood sugar levels are already higher than average, but not quite at the level to be labeled diabetic. Because your blood sugar levels are higher than average, if you have had prediabetes, it is a great risk factor for developing diabetes. Quail eggs are a food that is high in protein. The component of the food that is made of protein would be the egg white. The building blocks of the protein are amino acids. The indicator for protein is biuret.
Red hair is a gene that humans have. The chromosome that the gene is found on is chromosome 16 on the mother and father, as red hair is a recessive trait which requires the alleles from both parents. The alleles for red hair are r, because the alleles for red hair are not dominant, shown by the lowercase letters. Two alleles of the lowercase r are needed. In contrast, a dominant allele of capital R, let's say represents black hair, would only need to be expressed once, capital R, lowercase r, to express the gene trait. Starch is a polysaccharide whose chemical structure is C6H10O5. Foods that contain starch would include bread. Starch is used by the body to be broken down into glucose for energy. A disaccharide example would be sucrose. The chemical structure of sucrose is C12H22O11. A food that would contain sucrose would be a sugar cookie. Sucrose is used by the human body to be broken down into glucose to be used as energy. An aspect of the human body that must be maintained at homeostasis is the body temperature. If body temperature is not maintained at a constant, then the cells in the body are not able to function properly, leading ultimately to severe damage to the body or death. In the food testing lab, the test materials known to contain the particular macromolecules, such as starch, glucose, protein, and lipids, were used as the positive control. These test materials were used as the positive control because we knew that the test materials would give a positive result to the indicators, to find out the reaction and use that information to aid us in finding which macromolecules were in which foods. This was the positive control, because we used it to make sure the experiment was functional by comparing our results to it and making sure similar reactions occurred correctly. When you have diabetes, excess sugar, also known as glucose, builds up in your blood. Your kidneys are then forced to work overtime to filter and absorb the excess sugar. If your kidneys can't keep up, the excess sugar is excreted into your urine, along with fluids drawn from your tissues. This triggers more frequent urination, which may leave you dehydrated. As you drink more fluids to quench your thirst, you'll urinate even more. A manner of death is undetermined. The characteristics that make a death fall into the undetermined category is when no one from the medical examiners to the forensic analysts can agree on a suitable manner, or there is not enough evidence to determine the manner of death. An example of a nutrient would be vitamin C, which obviously falls into the category of a vitamin. Vitamin C is found in foods such as bell peppers, tomatoes, kiwis, and oranges, and other citruses. The body uses vitamin C to help lessen stress and to produce collagen, which is necessary in the body. Vitamin D is needed by the body because it is responsible for enhancing intestinal absorption of calcium, iron, magnesium, phosphate, and zinc, which are necessary for the body to function. Vitamin D can be found in dairy products such as milk or cheese and can also be gotten from going out and exercising in the sun. Watson and Crick were two very important men who discovered the completely true structure of DNA, and that DNA is a double helix which contains two parallel sequences of nitrogenous bases. This discovery was important as it created a new scientific biological frontier in which cures to genetic diseases, understanding of certain traits, and the bettering of the human race were instituted, according to the Nobel Prize Committee. Watson and Crick discovered it after piecing together the information found from Rosalind Franklin, Wilkins, and Chargaff to create the first accurate DNA model. A restriction enzyme which is used to cut DNA strands at different patterns is XMAI, which comes from the bacteria Xanthomonas malvacearum. The macromolecule that this enzyme cuts is nucleic acid, which makes up DNA. This also makes sense since restriction enzymes are used to create separate DNA strands. The target sequence where XMAI cuts at is C cut CCGGG. I know that yolk has trans fat in it because it is extremely high in cholesterol, which also contains lots of trans/saturated fat. As well as this, on the label of the yolk, it shows that it has lots of unsaturated fat, approximately 2.7 grams, which we know that unsaturated fat is trans fat, so that means that yolk has a lot of trans fat. Zapatopy.net is not a reliable information source. Firstly, because in the homepage it clearly states that it is a webpage of conspiracy theories. If it is a conspiracy, the information is most likely not going to be true. Secondly, the quotes are outdated and have no reliable sources in which it can be taken seriously. Lastly, it is obvious the tree octopus is not real, as octopi live in the water, not in trees. Because of these factors, I concluded this site to be unreliable and not having good information. The components that are made of carbohydrates in the zucchini bread are the flour and dough. The carbohydrates found in zucchini bread is starch, which is later turned into glucose. The indicator that could indicate its presence would be Lugol's iodine, as it is searching for starch. Yes! Okay, I'm finally done with this video. This took me forever to edit, forever to make, and I hope you got something out of it. I know it was kind of boring, it's so much information coming in, but that was basically the only way I could do it. And if you went through the whole entire thing and paid attention, then kudos to you, because even it took me some time, it was very hard for me to pay attention in the video. So that's about it, and good luck on the final exam. And if you're just watching this, then hope you enjoyed my project. Wong Productions.